Likutei Amarim means this is a collection of concepts, statements, almost if the Alter Rebbe is saying this work that I labored on for 20 years. Remember we said he spent 6 weeks contemplating yes or no to one letter? This work, I'm not the author. He never refers himself as the author. I'm not the author. I gathered, we might call it today like the editor. You take previously published works and you gather it together in a new version. So last time we met, we started the Tanya. It was very, very, very exciting. And it was really beautiful because people shared why Tanya was meaningful to them and ways they've gained and grown through Tanya. And then we started the introduction. Everything we said was sort of the background of understanding, both historically and philosophically, what was happening that created the Tanya. Really going back to the teacher of the Alter Rebbe, who was the Maggid of Mezrich, the successor of the Baal Shem Tov, there was already these heavenly persecutions because of how much he was spreading Hasidic thought. The Alter Rebbe managed to refute that, the whole famous parable of the king and the throne and the prince and the medicine. And then we said, but when the Alter Rebbe came along, it was an even greater revelation of Hasidic thought than ever before. Baal Shem Tov and his successor, the Maggid, they were showing us the goal, the vision, how we're supposed to serve God. But they didn't give us the step-by-step and how do you achieve that. They gave us the vision, the joy, the energy, the preciousness of every Jew, the preciousness of every piece of divine service. We saw the potential in the third generation in the development of Hasidus, which means the generation of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe laid out the roadmap, not only what the goals are, but how to achieve them, how to make these concepts understandable to the human mind, to the human psyche. The Alter Rebbe really revolutionized how we look at the mind. In the times of the Alter Rebbe, and coming from historical imperatives, from things that happened in the past, a lot of religious Jews, deeply Orthodox Jews, were almost like scared of the mind because they saw the mind for what it is, as something very cold, as something that the more you delve in it, you could have skepticism, you could have cynicism. The process of analysis could be taking godliness and sort of chopping it up into very small pieces. So there was almost like a fear of too much delving with your mind. The Alter Rebbe comes along and he says, all that's true. All that's true. And Chassidus agrees with all that. But the mind is the key to the soul. The most direct way to access your soul is through your mind. So yes, the mind in of itself can make us cold and skeptical and cynical and create doubts, but use that mind and immerse it in godliness, in Torah, in Hasidic thought, and the mind is the most direct way to access soul. And that's why throughout Tanya, we're doing something incredible. We're using our human minds and we're understanding godliness. And that's the process to access soul. And as we're going to discuss soon, to access the real goal of Tanya, a true, intense, passionate love and fear, awe, reverence of God. So Hasidim look at the Tanya as the foundation of all of Hasidic thought. Meaning, of course, since the Tanya, there's Maimarim, discourses of the Alter Rebbe himself and of all the generations after. There's much, much Hasidic thought that has developed and revealed to us many things that we don't know from learning Tanya. But Tanya is a foundation. It's considered like the written Torah, so to speak, of Chabad Hasidus. Just as we have the written Torah, Mishachum Shei Torah, the Sefer Torah, and then we have all of Torah that comes from there. We have Tanya, and then we have all of Hasidic thought that comes from there. And that's why there's many similarities, actually, between the Tanya and the Sefer Torah. Like, for example, Tanya has 53 chapters plus the introduction. And in the Sefer Torah, there's the Parsha of Bereshis, almost like the introductory Parsha, and then another 53 Parshias. They're both the source of everything. And both of them, both a Sefer Torah, Torah scroll, and the Tanya, does not have vowel marks, doesn't have, as we say, nekudos, doesn't have punctuation. There's even a whole story with the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, before he was Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, who wanted to put punctuation marks, put nekudos and punctuation marks in the Tanya to make it, as we would call it, more user-friendly, more accessible. And he had a dream. And in the dream, someone was showing him a Sefer Torah that had vowels in it, nekudos. And he was asked, is this kosher or puzzle, disqualified? And after a long time, he managed to say it was kosher. Still, he woke up, and that day when he went into his grandfather, the Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, whatever he had to do, he spoke. As he was leaving, the Alter Rebbe said to him, a Sefer Torah with nekudos, with those vowel marks, is not kosher. And he got the message. No, this is the Tanya. We don't touch it.
Can you repeat who had this dream or this thought?
The Tzemach Tzedek,
Not Tanya.
the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. He had the thought to menaked, to put nekudos in the Tanya. And then he had a dream where he was shown a Sefer Torah with nekudos, with the vowel marks. And he was asked, is it kosher or not? Legit or disqualified? Kosher or puzzle? And after a long time, it says he managed to say it was kosher. And then the next day, at a certain point in the day, he went into his grandfather, his Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, for something. And when he was leaving, the Alter Rebbe said to him this statement that, a Sefer Torah with nekudos, with those vowel marks, is puzzle. It's not kosher. And he understood the point that, no, we don't put nekudos in. So why don't we put the vowel marks in? I mean, it would be more user-friendly, and there might be many people here that would say, yeah, if there were vowel marks in, if there were nekudos, I'd be able to read it. Now I can't, or it's much more difficult. This is a whole point, this whole delicate balance of revealing and yet needing to hold back on the godliness. As we were discussing last time, that the Alter Rebbe was imprisoned for whatever the physical story was. The spiritual reason was for writing the Tanya. He sat 53 days for 53 chapters of Tanya. He wrote it, it was printed, it was published, and 2 years later, he's in prison for it. He's in prison for writing a godly sefer, a godly work. There was a heavenly prosecution. You take such godliness and reveal it? So even as he was revealing it, he was still trying to keep it a bit off, really, the planet earthiness. So therefore, almost no punctuation, no vowel marks, no nekudos. And of course, originally, it was not printed. It was literally handwritten copies. We said the Alter Rebbe spent 20 years himself composing the Tanya. And then he began giving it over to the Hasidim as a series of Hasidic discourses, Maimurim. The first Maimur was Rosh Hashanah of Tov Nun, the birth of his grandson and the third Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek. And this went over until the 10th of Kislev, Tov Nun Dalet. So we have the whole Nun and Nun Aleph and Nun Beis and Nun Gimel and a little bit of Nun Dalet. So we have a little bit over 4 years where the Alter Rebbe taught the Tanya to the Hasidim. He never gave them a book. He never showed them a book. He said it as a Hasidic discourse. And then they wrote it down. And then people copied it, and people copied it, and people copied it. And that's how the Tanya spread among the Hasidim. Well, why didn't he just print it? Obviously, in those days, it was quite difficult printing Jewish works, but that wasn't why, because when they needed to print it, they printed it. It was because for the same reason as he didn't put in vowel marks. It's so holy. It's God's inner secrets. It's God's inner wisdom. I can't make this as physical and earthy as literally a printed book. The same way keeping it free of the vowels is a little bit keeping away from that earthiness. Similarly, handwritten copies, your own sweat and ink, not a printed work, keeps it from being as, it's called commercial. And that's what the Alter Rebbe wanted. But that wasn't obviously ultimately what happened. We do have printed copies of the Tanya because shortly after the Alter Rebbe finished in Tov Nun Daled, in Tov Nun Zayin, 3 years later, he had to print it because there were many opponents to the Hasidic movement. And they saw here a great opportunity. Since it's handwritten copies, what they did was they put deliberate errors in the Tanya and then made many copies of them, including printing actually those copies and selling them for very, very, very cheap to spread the Tanya with its mistakes innocently among the Hasidim. The Hasidim don't realize, or Hasidim are hand copying mistakes, not realizing, and it spreads and it spreads and it spreads. And when the Alter Rebbe saw this, the Alter Rebbe said, okay, no choice. I don't want to print it. I didn't want it to become so earthy, but I have no choice. And that's when the Tanya was printed. And 2 years later, the Alter Rebbe went to prison for this. But as we said, when his teacher, his Rebbe and his Rebbe's Rebbe, his spiritual father and spiritual grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid, when they came and visited him in prison, and he said, why am I here? And they said, for spreading Hasidus so much. And he said, so should I stop? They said, no, you'll get out. That means you're vindicated. Spread it more. And of course, we know the quality of the Maimarim, of the discourses of the Alter Rebbe after he was released from prison, are far more extensive, far more elaborate, far more open in more and more revelation of godliness. So with that background to the background, let's start looking inside. Now, the first page, if you were looking inside the Tanya, there's a lot of pages in the beginning before chapter 1, but we're only going to focus on the ones that are, so to speak, original. So the first page, which looks like this, if anyone can see that, I don't know if it's so clear, is called the Sha'ar Blot, the gate page of Tanya. Now, in a Sha'ar Blot, and we have this till today in any Chabad Sefer, we have for every work, we have a Sha'ar Blot, a gate page, like the opening of the work, or we might see here the statement of purpose of the work. What's this about? Nowadays you buy a book and you can read what's written on the back or in the flap. So here we have the Sha'ar Blot. What is this work about? What is the purpose? So if we're looking here, before we get to the purpose, see on top, if you're looking inside, on one side it says Heichal Shlishi, and on the other side it says Sha'ar Rishon. Heichal Shlishi, Sha'ar Rishon. That concept of Heichal and Sha'ar was instituted by the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Rayatz. And he did this for all the Sfarim of Hasidus. There's a Heichal, the chamber. Each Rebbe has a chamber. So the Baal Shem Tov is the Heichal Rishon, the first chamber. The Maggid is Heichal Sheni, the second chamber. And the Alter Rebbe is Heichal Shlishi, the third chamber. And so it goes through the works of our Rebbe, who would then be the ninth chamber. Within the chamber, there's the Sha'ar, the gates. And the gates are organized in terms of spiritual significance. And the first Sha'ar, the first gate path of all the writings and works of the Alter Rebbe, of which there are many, is the Tanya. And therefore, it's Heichal Shlishi, the third Rebbe, starting with the Baal Shem Tov, and Sha'ar Rishon, the most significant work, the most significant gate, which is the Tanya. So we start with the names. What is this work? Sefer Likutei Amarim. This Sefer, he is entitling, it's in big print, this is its main title, Likutei Amarim. Likutei, a likut means a collection. Amarim means of statements. Chelik Rishon, the first section. When we speak of Tanya, we've been learning here for 35 some years, is the first section. Hanikra b'shem Sefer Shel Beinonim, which is called the Book of the Beinonim. So the Alter Rebbe, it's his work. He's giving us the title, and he's giving what we might call today a subtitle. The official title is Likutei Amarim. The subtitle is Sefer Shel Beinonim. So what does each one mean? Let's unpack this a little bit. Likutei Amarim means this is a collection of concepts, statements, almost if the Alter Rebbe is saying this work that I labored on for 20 years. Remember we said he spent 6 weeks contemplating yes or no to one letter. This work, I'm not the author. He never refers himself as the author. I'm not the author. I gathered, we might call it today like the editor. You take previously published works and you gather it together in a new version. I was a malakate, Likutei Amarim, which both shows, of course, his unbelievable humility. He spent 20 years and now he's saying he's the gatherer of these ideas. And he's also emphasizing everything here is sourced. Everything here is concepts that have already been published, so to speak. It's not mine, that humility, and it's all founded in the sources, which we see throughout Tanya, that the Alter Rebbe always, very, very often, he will bring sources for what he's telling us, even though his ideas are a step beyond the sources, but he still always wants to go back to the source, where he got this from, or from where did this new concept emerge. So that's the title. I'm the malakate, I'm the compiler, not my work. I just pulled a few things together, Likutei Amarim. And the subtitle, you want to understand more what this book is about, because Likutei Amarim doesn't tell you at all what it's about. Sefer Shel Beinonim. This is the work for the Beinoni. The Alter Rebbe wrote another work that we do not have, called Sefer Shel Tzadikim. I guess the manual guide for the tzaddik, for that Jew who completely conquers his evil. That, as many other writings over the years, was burnt. We don't have it. But this is Sefer Shel Beinonim. This is for, the everyman Jew. This is the goal and aspiration of every Jew to achieve the status of a Benoni, as the Tanya explains the term. Benoni, and we'll discuss this at length when we get to chapter 1, means in the middle. You're not the holiest Jew like a tzaddik. You're not an evil Jew like a Rasha. You're a Benoni. But starting with chapter 1 of Tanya, we quickly understand the greatness of the Benoni. So what's this about? Your guide, your journey, your roadmap, how you become that Benoni. Those are the two titles of this work. Now notice, the Alter Rebbe does not call this work Tanya. He calls it Likutei Amarim. He calls it Sefer Shel Beinonim. Tanya is not one of the titles. Where do we get the word? Why do we all call it? We don't call, oh, I'm going to Likutei Amarim class. Oh, pass me the Likutei Amarim. You don't know what that is? Pass me the Sefer Shel Beinonim. We say the Tanya. Tanya is the first word. Chapter 1, first word is Tanya. Tanya actually means we learn. And when we get to chapter 1, we will explain why it is such a significant word that Hasidim, without knowing all that I can tell you about the word, sort of organically called it, not Likutei Amarim, not Sefer Shel Beinonim. They call it Tanya. Sort of in my mind similar to how we refer to the shul and Beis Medrash of the Rebbe as 770. The whole world, by now, literally the whole world has heard of 770. Crazy. Since when do you call a building by the numbers of its address? I don't know the numbers of the address of many places that I know how to get to, that I'm familiar with. Yet 770 was the term for the shul and Beis Medrash of the Rebbe, and years later, the Rebbe explained to us why. The Rebbe explained the significance of 770. When the original people started sort of calling it 770, they knew these concepts? No, the Mazel knew. They went in that direction without knowing why. And similarly, Hasidim refer to this as Tanya without even knowing why. The first word of a book suddenly becomes its title. And when we learn, we'll understand why. Any questions on any of this before I keep going?
Could you just explain again the chelik and the shar? Like, what are those?
Sure. The Rebbe Rayatz, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, he codified or organized the Sfarim of Hasidus. And what he did was, for each Rebbe, he said each Rebbe is another heichal, as if each Rebbe is another chamber in the Mesifta de Rakia, in the heavenly chambers. There's a new space of learning Torah that was opened up by each Rebbe. So each Rebbe is a successive heichal. So the Baal Shem Tov is the first, the Alter Rebbe is the third, the Rebbe is the ninth. In other words, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is the heichal, is the chamber. Like there's another chamber in heaven for each specific, unique development of Hasidic thought. So that's very easy. Once we're told that, we could figure it out ourselves. But also within the works, the Rebbe Rayatz organized what's the order of significance, of spiritual energy. And each work he called a sha'ar, like a gate. Within the chamber, there's a various gates getting into the heichal, getting into the chamber. And he organized them through his understanding. Obviously, we wouldn't be the ones to be able to do this, of the significance. So Shar Rishon, Shar Sheni, Shar Shlishi, first gate, second gate, third gate. So the Tanya, from all the works of the Alter Rebbe has many Maimarim, of course, is Sha'ar Rishon, the first gate, the most significant work of all of the works of the Alter Rebbe. And if you look at the Maimarim of the Alter Rebbe as gathered, of course, we only have a tiny, tiny fraction of the Maimarim of the Alter Rebbe. What's recorded in the Likutei Torah and Torah are, those Maimarim discuss concepts of seeming greater depth, more esoteric concepts, more mystical concepts than we discuss in Tanya. Tanya is meant to be every man's guide to becoming a Benoni. So it's actually it's supposed to be, very accessible. Every Jew should learn this. Every Jew should become this Benoni. The mystical, deep, spiritual concepts, we'll leave that for the Maimarim. But when the Rebbe Rayatz organized, of course, the Sha'arim, Tanya is Sha'ar Rishon of all the works of the Alter Rebbe. Continuing. Melukat mipi sfarim mipi soifrim kedoshi elyon nishmasam eden. So again, following along the same theme of his absolute humility, I didn't write this. This isn't my original genius. Melukat. I'm the melakate. I'm the gatherer. This is melukat. This is gathered. Mipi sfarim or mipi soifrim. I gathered it from the books. I gathered it from the scribes, like the books and the people of the books. So Hasidim explained that the Sfarim means the works that the Alter Rebbe would delve in, from which he then was able to emerge with his own Heichal and Shar. It's not that Tanya is a cut and paste job of any of these works, but these works are like sort of the foundational thoughts from which the Alter Rebbe then developed the Tanya. So the works are generally Kabbalistic, Reishis Chachma, the Shlah HaKadosh, the writings of the Maharal of Prague, who's actually, of course, the ancestor of the Alter Rebbe, and also the Rambam. Now, the Rambam is not Kabbalah. The Rambam is what we call Chakira, inquiry, investigation, analysis. So that's sort of almost the composition of Tanya. On one hand, it's very mystical. It's very spiritual. It's giving us diagramming our soul and God and the relationships. So it's very, very mystical energy, but in a very intellectually clear, systematic, organized fashion. So we have the organization of the Rambam, so to speak, with the mysticism of the Reishis Chachma, the Shla, the Maharal of Prague. Those are the Sfarim, the works that the Alter Rebbe immersed himself in and then was able to produce the Tanya. The people, the Seifrim, are the Baal Shem Tov and the Mezritch Maggid, the Maggid of Mezritch, the Baal Shem Tov, his spiritual grandfather, the Maggid, his spiritual father, and Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Haradok, otherwise known as Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk. That was his peer. And now, Rabbi Menachem Mendel was far older than the Alter Rebbe, but both of them were peers in that they were both students of the Mezritch Maggid. We see a tremendous impact and practical things that happened in the life of the Alter Rebbe because of Rabbi Menachem Mendel. Rabbi Menachem Mendel, after the passing of the Maggid, his, as we call it, Chevraya Kedisha, the inner circle of disciples, divided up the areas where Hasidim were among them. And then Rabbi Menachem Mendel decided at a certain point he's going to Eretz Yisrael. When he went to Eretz Yisrael, actually, the Alter Rebbe wanted to follow him to Eretz Yisrael, but was told no, turn back. Because Rabbi Menachem Mendel went to Eretz Yisrael, that is why the Alter Rebbe was collecting funds for Eretz Yisrael. As many of you probably know the history on the physical plane, how did the people that were opposed to the Alter Rebbe get the Russian government to view him as such a traitor that they imprisoned him and wanted to take away his life? Because they said, look, he's gathering funds to send to the enemy of Russia, Turkey. He wants to build up an empire there. He wants to revolt. He wants to become the king of the Jews and go to Israel. Well, he was collecting funds, not for Turkey, but for Israel. Why was he collecting funds for Israel? Because Menachem Mendel of Haradok had gone with his Hasidim to Israel, to the northern area, like in Tzfas, and it was tremendously impoverished there, even more than the tremendous poverty the Jews were experiencing in Russia. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe would send very systematically, as everything he did, very organized, would collect, and it was almost like a tax. It was like demanded from the Hasidim to collect this charity to send it to Israel to support the Hasidim of Rabbi Menachem Mendel and those Hasidim that were in Israel. So this was actually on the physical plane how those people that were opposed to the Hasidic movement and the Alter Rebbe specifically as the leader and therefore most dangerous one, how they were able to convince the Russians that he has to be removed because look, he's supporting the enemy because he was raising funds for Rabbi Menachem Mendel and his Hasidim. There's a letter in Tanya actually that the Alter Rebbe wrote on the passing of Rabbi Menachem Mendel. And in the beginning of Tanya, in the introduction of Tanya, when the Alter Rebbe writes how he has to print this work because there's more and more and more Hasidim, one reason was because Rabbi Menachem Mendel went to Eretz Yisrael. Meaning, yes, some of the Hasidim traveled with him, but the bulk couldn't pick up and leave. So there's this vast territory that was supposed to be Rabbi Menachem Mendel's of Haradok, but he went to Eretz Yisrael. So now this sort of became absorbed into the area of the Alter Rebbe. There were also other reasons, like Reb Levi Yitzchak Berditchev getting run out of town. So those areas he also absorbed. So after a few years, in other words, originally after the passing of the Maggid, the Alter Rebbe was the youngest of this Chevraya Kedisha. He was the youngest of this group. In a few years, he had the largest territory because he had also Reb Nachum Mendel's, also Reb Levi Yitzchak's. So that's what he's referring to actually in the introduction, where he says, like, there's a lot more Hasidim. We need a book. Oh, we'll get to that. So we see through all these different ideas that actually Reb Nachum Mendel had a lot of influence in some of the happenings that we're going to see with Alter Rebbe. So the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid, and Reb Nachum Mendel Haradok, all of whom influenced the Alter Rebbe very much, they're the Soifrim of the Tanya. What are we reading this for? Why did the Alter Rebbe spend 20 years writing this? What did he want to achieve? So the Alter Rebbe says, Miyusad al Pasuk, what you're going to learn, these 53 chapters, I want to explain to you one verse. One verse in Torah. Remember, this is all from the sources. It's a verse in Torah. I want you to understand this verse. What is the verse? The matter is very close to you in your mouth and in your heart to do it. The Alter Rebbe says, I really want you to know that verse. I'm going to spend 53 chapters teaching you that verse. What does this mean? This verse is telling us, Kikarov Elecha, the matter, your relationship to God, your service of God. This goal, Kikarov Elecha Davar Ma'id, it's very close. It's very near. It's very accessible. It's very doable. It's very accessible and doable and close and near. We might use the word easy. To serve God. To serve God in what way? Beficha, ubilvavcha, la'asoso. In your mouth, in your heart, to do it. Now, this verse is dissected throughout Tanya, but we're not going to do that now. We'll wait over the chapters that dissect this verse. But the basic meaning is, we are referring here to the three garments of soul. A soul has garments. Garments means powers of expression. There's a soul, but how does a soul reach outward to impact us? I have my soul, but how do I talk to my soul? How do I hear my soul's voice? How does my soul express itself? Through three garments. My thought, my speech, and my actions. Beficha ubelvavcha la'asoso. Beficha, your speech. Bilvavcha, your heart connects to your mind, as it says, leiv mavin, an understanding heart, the heart and the mind. And la'asoso, action, are maisa. So it is very close to you to serve God, absolutely. With every garments, things you take on and you take off, but no, you're always going to keep them on. Your garment of thought, your garment of speech, your garment of deed, completely, perfectly, absolutely, you will serve God with every thought you think, with every feeling you feel, with every word you say, with every action you do. That's what this verse is saying. That is what Moshe Rabbeinu, what Moses is telling the Jewish people. It's so close to you. It's so near to you. It's so accessible to you to serve God absolutely perfectly. And the obvious question is, really? I never realized that. I would never have thought that. How? The Alter Rebbe says, that's what I'm coming to teach you. I want to teach you how it is so accessible to serve God absolutely. And I'm going to explain it initially, foundationally, in two ways. As the Alter Rebbe goes on to say, Levayer Heitev, my goal, why I'm writing the Tanya, why this was worth dedicating 20 years of the life of the Alter Rebbe to write this Tanya, to explain very well Eichu Karov Ma'od, how it's so close, how it's so accessible, how it's so near to you. B'derech arucha uktsara, in a long way and in a short way. Ezras Hashem Yisbarach, with the help of God, obviously that's what we need to make anything work here, especially something as sublime as teaching the Jewish people how it is so close to serve God. So how is it so close to serve God? Like, let's just, preempt years, as we said. It takes years for us to learn the Tanya. How is it close? We don't want to wait 7-8 years to find out. The Alter Rebbe's premise, this is the foundational premise of the entire Tanya. Everything in the next 53 chapters is based on this concept. The Jew has a spiritual ability to serve God perfectly. As I said, every thought he thinks, every feeling he has, every word he says, every action he does, only and absolutely for God. How do we do that? The Alter Rebbe says, by really loving and fearing God. That is the key. That is the premise of the entire Tanya. If I can get a Jew, so to speak, the Alter Rebbe is saying, if I can get you to really love and fear God, we're done. It is so near and close and accessible as his service. Why? Well, as the Alter Rebbe unpacks over these chapters, and we could just say very briefly here, love and fear, awe, reverence, whatever word you want to use for that, these are the foundations of our motivation. Meaning, if you know something, that doesn't necessarily compel you to do it. We might all know exactly what's the healthy food and exactly what are the horrible foods for me, but then we eat, And so too with many things. I might know exactly what's the right thing to say and the wrong thing to say, but then I talk. So knowledge does not create the actions that the knowledge should create. I could know it, but my actions might not be at all in sync with what I know. And for many of us, we can think of many practical examples of how what we know and what we do are not always in sync. So what does motivate us? The Alter Rebbe says what motivates us is our emotions. When we have really strong emotions, that's our motivator. So it's interesting because Chabad Hasidus is officially intellectual, which it is, and yet we're saying we need the emotion. So the Alter Rebbe's point is you need to utilize your mind to create or access your emotions. But when you have your emotions, then it's kikarov. Then you'll be serving God perfectly. Why? Because if you love someone, you want to give to them. That's actually the Hebrew word for love, ahava. The shoresh, the root word, the etymology of ahava is have, to give. When we love, we give. And if you love someone, you want to be with them. So if I love God, I want to give to him. I give to him by serving him. If I love God, I want to be with him. I'm with him when I serve him, literally. And these ideas are explained at length and depth in the Tanya. I'm literally giving to God. He's literally dependent on me, like, of course, the beginning of chapter 41 of Tanya. And I'm literally one with him, fused with him in the deepest ways possible by my Torah study and by my commandments. So I'm giving and I'm one with, and that's all I want when I love. And the fear component, we need both, as the Alter Rebbe explains at length in Tanya. A bird cannot fly on one wing alone, and for sure not if it's wingless. And every service is the bird, and it needs the two wings of love and fear, as of course we're going to learn at length. The fear, again, in the simple level, is what's holding me back from doing anything wrong. Because if I really love, I'm really cautious. I'm concerned. I don't want to do anything to harm that relationship. If that relationship is so precious, I want to be so careful. I have a fear of destroying that relationship. So the love is really what's motivating me to do everything for God, to give him and be with him. And the fear is really motivating me to keep away from anything that would harm that relationship. And of course, I'm saying this simply, and there's many, many levels to this as we learn throughout Tanya, but that's the basic concept. So the Alter Rebbe is saying, this verse says it's so accessible and doable and easy, near to you to serve God perfectly. And we say, I never realized that. And the Alter Rebbe says, because you don't love and fear enough. If you really loved and feared God, you would naturally be serving him so perfectly. So the Alter Rebbe's goal in Tanya is to bring us to that intensity of love and that intensity of fear. And when we have that intensity of love and fear, yes, kikarov. It's so natural to serve. And the Alter Rebbe says, I'm going to explain this to you in two roads, two approaches. The long approach, which is the first 17 chapters of Tanya, and the short approach, which is from chapter 18 to chapter 25. So I'll briefly explain the difference. The long approach and the short approach have the same commonality. You're using your mind in both of them. You're using your mind to access or create intense love and fear of God in both of them. So the overarching theme of Tanya, you need to use your mind and you need to have tremendous love and fear. And if you have that tremendous love and fear, or not if, when you have that tremendous love and fear, it will be kikarov. It will be so natural for you to serve God perfectly. They both share. There's no difference between the long road and the short road in terms of the overarching principles. The difference is, how do I achieve that love and fear? That's the difference between the long road and the short road. The long road is not only called long because it's 17 chapters, and the short road is much less chapters. That's not the real reason. The long, though it might be part of it. The long road and the short road is the approach. The approach of the long road is every Jew has the spiritual ability to create an emotional relationship with God. If you use your mind, study the concepts about God, as we would say the concepts of Hasidus. After you've mastered the concepts, you contemplate the concepts, what in Hebrew we call hisboinenos. You immerse your mind and you fill your mind, and all that's in your mind is the idea. You're not studying the idea. You're not acquiring the idea. You're not understanding it. You already did that in stage one. Stage one is you completely, foundationally, fundamentally learn a concept about God, concept of Hasidus. And stage two is drown your mind in it. Immerse your mind in it. Think and think and think about the concept. And what you're doing, remember we said the Alter Rebbe's innovative idea, so to speak. The mind is the key to the soul. As your mind is immersed in Hasidic thought, you're accessing the powers of your soul, the love and fear of God. Depending on what the Hasidic thought is, it's which emotion is going to emerge. Am I thinking in very broad strokes? If I'm thinking how good God is, how loving, how kind, how beneficent, how powerful, but how good, a love will come forth. If I'm thinking of his power and his might and the awe, a fear will come forth. And again, within this, of course, there's nuances. Is he good and close, which would be love? Is he good and far, which would be thirst? But those are details. Based on what I'm thinking, a fear or a love of God will emerge. How do they emerge? Because I created them with the powers of my soul that were accessed by my mind and these thoughts of godliness, these thoughts of Hasidus. So this is called the long road of Tanya because it's long, meaning it's a long journey. You are literally creating a love and a fear of God from your soul powers through your mind's immersion in Hasidic thought. It's a long road, man-made. It's not as powerful as a love that God creates for us, perhaps, but it's very, very, very valued because of the enormous effort that goes into it. And that's a general rule with God. The harder we work, the more he appreciates it. We sort of have the same rule also, right? So if someone works really hard for something and then it happens, we have such joy. If you got something easy, as we say, easy come, easy go. But if I really work for something, I really appreciate it. When we really work on creating our own love and fear of God, God really appreciates it. It's very, very valued. So in terms of its value, it's so powerful. So powerful. In terms of its ultimate power of love or fear, maybe God could give us loves that are higher, and he does. But this one is, in a sense, the most powerful love because I made it myself, man-made. And it's a long road because it takes a lot of work to literally create such pure, intellectually created love and fear of God. Short road, which starts in chapter 18, is actually, we could say, almost deeper intellectually, which might be why it's second. But it's shorter in terms of if you can master the thoughts, it's faster, easier almost to feel that love and fear. Because in the short road, you are not creating a love or creating a fear of God. What you're doing is uncovering the natural love and fear embedded in your soul. Now, in chapters 18 through 25, we discuss the love and fear God gave us, what we call the natural hidden love and natural hidden fear of God. As Tanya continues, we find out there are deeper and deeper levels of love and fear that God gave us. We have many levels of love and fear that God gave us. We have very, very powerful, intense, high levels of love and fear that God gave us. So in terms of spiritual height, obviously a love and fear created by God are more powerful than anything I could ever create myself. But in terms of spiritual value, that I took that time, that I took that effort. I think of it like when someone comes home from preschool, a child comes home from preschool with a beautiful project, clearly made by the teacher, or a not as beautiful project, but clearly the handwork of your child. So the long road is the handwork of your child. It's very, very precious. The shorter road is the handwork of God. It's very, very powerful because it's God made. How do we access the love and fear that God embedded in our soul? Like, wouldn't it be that cool? We don't have to create it. It's already there and it's so high. How do we access it? So we access it also, this is Chabad Hasidus, by using our mind to uncover our natural relationship with God. And as we will explain in quite a while, we get there. The basic premise of the short road is everything is God. There is nothing but God. I too am part of God's reality. The more I understand, using my mind, all there is God, and I am part of God's reality, the more I naturally feel this love and fear of God that's buried inside of me. That is a very brief synopsis. I could elaborate more if anyone wants, but that is a foundational idea. So again, in the long road and in the short road, you are using your mind. In the long road and in the short road, you're walking away with a strong love and fear that's going to make service to God so natural and perfect. The difference, critical difference, is in the long road, you're creating the love and fear by learning the concepts of Hasidus, hispainus, immersion in the concepts, which creates from the powers of your soul this love and fear. And in the shorter road, and it is shorter time-wise, it is far easier, though the ideas are deeper, but the technique is far easier. You are going to truly immerse yourself in the understanding of the unity of God, of the absolute oneness of God, that all there is God. There is nothing but God. And the more you think of these thoughts, the more naturally your soul opens up to her real reality, and you feel such a love and such a fear of God, such a love and wanting to be with God, such an awareness that all there is God and this is all you ever want, and such a fear of losing that relationship. Shorter, faster, less chapters, less time to uncover, doesn't have the value of literally man-made, but are very, very powerful loves that God embedded in our soul.